afternoon, my family. You are so awesomely beautiful. Thank you. I am Kim, and I am a real alcoholic. Amen. Please help me give this to God. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right, my sobriety date is December 20th, 1988. And I don't think about it till I'm at an event like this or somebody asks me. And every time I say it, it's like, I can't believe that that's happened in my life. Because if you would have asked me all that time ago, or, told me that this was going to happen, I would have looked at you very honestly and said, you don't understand. Things like that don't happen for people like me. Because my life has been such an amazing journey. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's all been wonderful. And if there's any new people here today, what I would like you to put in your heart is the fact that I don't care what's happening in your life and how hard or horrible you think it is, just please hang in there one more day because it's going to get better. And don't leave. Don't leave. We have too many people. I know it's got to be happening here. We have too many people back home dying. And it hurts us because you get here and we love you and we don't want you to leave. So please stay. Do the best you can to stay. If you put half your heart into this, as you did, much effort, half the effort as you did out there, it's going to work for you. It's going to work for you. I remember when I was in high school, oddly enough, I used to be really athletic. And they didn't put I was a fantastic baseball player, but they didn't put money into girls' sports like that when I was in school. I should tell you, I'm 63 years old. I have no idea how that happened. And but they didn't put money into girls' baseball or anything then. So we didn't have too much to choose from. And I chose track. And I wanted to do like the 50-yard dash, stuff like that. And the coach was like, Kim, you just ain't fast enough, honey. And I was like, yeah, put a cop behind me and see how fast I could run, So, he made us do a little bit of everything so he could see what we were good at. And mine back then was a high jump. And he would say, and I'd be like, I don't like this. I don't like doing this. And he would tell me time after time after time, sweetheart, just throw your body over the bar, do it often enough, and your heart's going to follow. And that's kind of the way it was for me when I came here. The first time I had my experience with Alcoholics Anonymous, I was court-ordered in July of 1984. And the judge looked at me and he said, sweetheart, you don't get 90 meetings in 90 days. You get 180 meetings in 180 days. And don't you miss number 179, because you will ride out X amount of years at Marysville, which is our women's prison in Ohio. And for the first time, I got a little bit scared. I wasn't scared. I knew I could do jail. I'd done jail before, but I also knew prison was a whole different animal, and I wasn't big enough and strong enough to survive some of the things I might have to survive down there. And they snatched my driver's license for 3 years. And to say that I got a ride to every single one of those meetings would not be a true statement. I had been going to a meeting in town that was, I should say, let me say this before I forget, because I don't want to be mannerless. Thank you for asking me to be here. Every time somebody asks me to be somewhere, it's a very humbling feeling for me because I was always asked to leave so many places. And I want to say, I know there's got to be some here. If there's veterans here, I want to say thank you for your service and thank you for our freedom. Veterans are really important to me. My whole family was Marine Corps veterans. My grandson's in the Marines, and he'll be coming home, I hope, in September for good, I hope. And but I've always loved the veterans. I don't care what branch of the service you're in, male, female, whatever you are. I love you for what you do, and I want to thank you. So anyway, I didn't want to forget that. and also members of the forces, whatever. I mean, the police force, all those people. I can't be mad at people like that. I used to not like policemen, but now I have a different view on them. But and also, just in case, I sometimes have neurological problems, so I get a picture of what I want to say in my head, but I can't get the words. So if you know it, you probably will shout it out, because you can't embarrass the hillbilly. So just shout it out. So anyway, I'm going to this meeting in town because, all the bikers and the old vets and everybody went there, and I felt really comfortable there. And then they snatched my driver's license. I had to drive kind of close to home. So, and back then had to kind of imagine what I looked like back then. I was like 28, 29 years old. I blew a 4999 on my DUI, and I could drink a little bit, and. So back then, every article of clothing I wore came out of this catalog called Frederick's Hollywood. And for those young people that are here that don't know what that is, Frederick's Hollywood's a catalog for hoes. And, and that there was set into motion when I was 5 years old. I grew up in a neighborhood full of boys. And so as I grew up, I always learned boy things, and I never knew girl things. And even now, I have a hard time with girl things, because I can side a house, I can build a garage, I could play ball with the boy. Oh, I could crack a baseball country mile, things like that. When we played Cowboys and Indians and Rat Patrol and Combat, and I could build tree houses that were unbelievable, but I couldn't do too many girls. Like, don't give me a Barbie doll. Don't give me one of them things, And so one day I was playing with my little buddy Tommy, and out of the blue, Tommy looked at me and said, "You know what, Kimmy, if you drop your drawers and show me your possum, I'll give you a nickel." And that day, all I could think about was the candy I could buy down at the corner store with that nickel. And seriously, that day, that event in my life guaranteed me a very bright future in sales, And, so then you fast forward 20-some years, and I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was kind of forced here, and my attitude was not good. I thought they dumped me in the local chapter of the Gray Panthers, but they snatched my license, so now I go to our Canfield meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and like I said, you had to know what I looked like back then. My hair was down past my rear end in the back. In the front, it was a mohawk, because they had done surgery to reconstruct my jaw, because I had my jaw broken a couple times. And when they do that, they shave all around here, so I'm cut all the way around my ears so they can get down in my face. And so I had my girlfriend buzz it all the way. I went in and said, "Buzz it, give me a mohawk." So she did. She's like, "Don't you tell anybody I did this to you," And it would be various colors sometimes. Sometimes it would be red and purple. Sometimes it would be red, white, and blue. Sometimes whatever mood I was in, And that week I went to the Campfield meeting. We used to call that the high bottom drunk meeting, because it was a lot of doctors and attorneys and people with a lot of scratch, pretty high up on the social scale. And I wish I had a picture of their faces the first night I walked down into that meeting. And because I happened to be wearing big high black leather hip boots and a black leather halter top and a black leather skirt about that big. And back then, underpants were not my friend, right? And that night, my hair happened to be red, and I got my first resentment in AA as I walked in. Two old-timers were sitting there, Vic Lang and Kenny Lady, who later became two of my best friends. But Vic looked at Kenny and said, "When the redhead walks in, sobriety walks out." Let me tell you something, truer words were never spoken. Because for the next probably year and a half, all women did was grab their husbands and run from me. It was bad. I was bad. I refused to get a woman sponsor because I hated women back then. I did not like women back then. I refused to work the steps, and we all know that you have to work the steps to be sober. and which is why I don't call myself sober back then. I always say I was abstinent because I did not work a step. There were lots of things that I just wouldn't do. I radiated hate at everybody. I just radiated hate. I went to a men's discussion meeting one time for 3 weeks and didn't know it was a men's discussion meeting, and I think they were afraid to tell me. You know. I mean, looking back, I felt bad for them. You know what I mean? It's like, I had to be horrible, you know. But anyway, I'm going to this Campville meeting, and somehow, you know, I started drinking when I was 10 years old. And obviously, at 10 years old, you're not a daily drinker. But I will tell you, from the very first time I got drunk, I had a blackout, and I'm a blackout drinker. From that very first time, all I did was plan for the next time that I could drink. And almost every single time I drank, I had a blackout. And I can probably remember this many times coming home in my life. And all I had was that very short period of absence in between, because I wasn't there very long when I went back out. But it was, I'm at the Campville meeting, so I'm mildly brain damaged because I've been drinking from the time I'm 10 till I'm 29 or whatever I was when I got here the first time. And they asked me to make the coffee at the meeting, and I didn't understand that I didn't have to do that. If that makes sense for anybody. And so I'm on the way there every Friday night, and it's like, here I am on Friday night, and this is not what I thought I was going to have to do for the rest of my life, make coffee at this dumb old church, at this dumb old meeting with these old people, you know. So I'm making the coffee, and you got to excuse what I'm going to say, because we had somebody at that meeting back then. His name, oddly enough, his name was Bill W., and he's passed away now, and but he gave me this nickname of Shithead. And we would, back then, that's when we had for real coffee cups. And, you know, it's like Scott said last night, you couldn't see anybody in the meeting who was leaving for the smoke in the meeting. And so we had to wash ashtrays. And I'd hear, hey, shithead, we need more coffee. Hey, shithead, you think you'd stay after the meeting and help us wash these coffee cups? Hey, shithead, how'd you like to go out with us after the meeting for coffee? And I would be like, oh, my gosh. You know, and I got this I'm going to outpatient counseling that they ordered, and I got this little 24-year-old South Carolina, Myrtle Beach little counselor already got a master's degree. You know, I already know she ain't had a good shot of anything to drink and never had a good bed romping with anybody. And she looks at me, and I'm telling her about this nemesis I have in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she looks at me, you just need to learn how to journal your feelings. So in my journal, I got how I'm going to cut his throat, murder him, and dismember his body and put pieces on all four corners of the earth, you know. And so she'd look at it, and all I would see is like, you know, and that's probably how we get a diagnosis of a sociopath, psychopath personality disorder, you know. But anyway, I go through the outpatient treatment and anything, you know, things like that. But the funny thing is I was probably going to, I don't know, between 9 and 12 meetings a week. And I probably should have told you, I graduated June 1972. October 7th, 1972, I married Satan's brother. And it wasn't good. It wasn't a good thing. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, and I wanted out of the house, and I kind of liked him, and he kind of liked me. So we got married, and he worked at Generous Motors, and I had a brand new car, and he at that time worked afternoon turn, which afternoon turn at General Motors was probably at least 12-hour shifts. And so I was turned loose on the world at 18 years old with that car all night. And I could wreak havoc on the world with that car. And I remember a few things that happened. I was out one night, and God talked about the birds chirping. I had to crack up. I knew I was in trouble when I heard them birds. And it was like, oh, I've done it again, you know. I remember one night, pulling in the driveway. And I should tell you, I remember sometimes the befores I remember, here and there the afters, sometimes a little bit of the in-betweens, but it's usually I remember because people have told me. But I remember staggering in the house, and he's screaming and hollering and yelling at me, "Hurry up and get my lunch packed, you drunken witch. I'm going to be late for work. You've been out all night with the damn car. Hurry up." So, I'm trying to stand up, let alone get his lunch back. And I'm pulling everything out of the refrigerator, and I get the lunch meat, and I get the bread, and I get the tomato, and the lettuce and stuff. And it was a brand new package of lunch meat, and I didn't realize when I opened it that I made a sandwich with the picture of the bologna instead of the piece of bologna. So I guess when he go to work and he bit the sandwich, everything pulled out when and he wasn't very happy about that when he come home. It was not good. Not good at all. He was a pretty physical guy. That marriage was a comedy of errors. He would be mean to me, and I would get real drunk and passive aggressive and do stuff to him to get even with him when I was drunk. Another night I'd been out, and my ex-husband, the older they get, the more alike they look. He is a spitting image of Clint Eastwood. And I don't care if you've seen Dirty Harry. I don't care if you've seen Gran Torino. When Clint Eastwood gets mad and he gives you that look and that eyebrow goes up and his lip quivers. Well, when you're drunk and you haven't even known what you've done wrong, it's enough to make you pee your pants. You know what I mean? And one night I stepped through the door and he's sitting on the couch right in front of me, and he looks down and he says, "Holy Jesus," with that look. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what is it? I've just arrived. I don't even know what happened," And I looked down, and to this day, I don't know what happened. I don't know if I went potty and pulled my pantyhose off over my shoes and couldn't get them back up, took my switchblade and chopped them off, because I got like this much pantyhose flopping off the end of each shoe. And, I don't know, some guy pulled them off. I don't know what happened, And, I can tell you all kinds of things. I wondered why he got mad. You know what I mean? Another night we had a party, and my tolerance was always a little higher than his. It was like I was 10 years old that time I got drunk. No 10-year-old should be able to drink 6 cans of beer. There's something wrong with that. There's just something not right with that. But the one night we had this party, and and then everybody goes home, and I'm still raring to go, and I go in the bedroom, and he's passed out on the bed in his shorts. And I'm mad as a hornet. And even now, my recovery goes wonderful till little Kim shows up, throws a monkey wrench in it, right? Because I might be standing here with 28 years of recovery, but it's like sometimes I got a 28-year-old brain. You know what I mean? My sponsor will tell you that in a heartbeat. And, she just moved to Las Vegas not too awful long ago. But when she was here, she was like, "Where are you speaking this weekend?" And I said, "Oh, I'm speaking up at a little conference in Defiance, Ohio." And she goes, "How wonderful you get to speak in a town named after you." Yep. So, anyway, I'm drunk, and I'm sitting on the bed cross-legged glaring at him. He's laying there in his tighty-whities, you know what I mean? And I'm drunk, and I look over, and I see this black permanent magic marker laying on the nightstand. And I'm drunk, and I know I'm drunk, and I know I shouldn't pick up that magic marker. But little Kim shows up, and she whispers in my ear, and she goes, "Do it, Kim, do it." So I get the magic marker, and I do glasses and freckles and a mustache and a beard all over his face. And I drew all down his arms, and I drew all down his chest. And I pulled his shorts down. And I drew a little mouse on that. It was a little mouse because that was one of his shortcomings. I drew all down his legs, and I flipped him over, and I drew all up the back of him, and then evidently I passed out. Because the next thing I know, this is when he had gone day shift. Next thing I know, it's 5:30 in the morning, and he's standing in the middle of the bed screaming. because the alarm clock didn't go off. He throws his clothes on, runs out, jumps in the car, and drives the GM without ever looking in the mirror, right? And, 5:30 that afternoon, I'm like geeking out the curtains, you know. And I see his car come around the corner on 2 wheels, and man, I locked the screen door. I slammed the big wooden door. I locked the wooden door. He pulled the screen door off the house. He kicked in the big wooden door, and to this day, I have no idea why I was laying in the bathtub with the wash rag like this. Because it had to be one of the worst beatings I ever got in my life, but it was worth every minute of it. Because his face was all raw and bloody where he tried to scrub that stuff off. And he wore it for like 4 days. It's only been like the last couple years. I thought, I wonder what the guy at the next urinal thought, you know? When he pulled that out, like, you gonna set a trap for that little thing or what? You know, and that's the kind of stuff that would go on there, you know? And I mean, I could stand here and entertain you with hilarity all night long, but obviously it didn't stay like that, you know? And because girls, when they've been not treated nice growing up, that's the kind of person we pick to have a relationship with. And I told you I was a blackout drinker. And I remember when people started telling me the things that I did in those blackouts, and I would feel really bad, and I'd be ashamed. And I went to him the one time, and I said, you know what, I'll do anything in the world you want me to do to make up for the things I do when I drink. And I will never forget the morning that I rolled over in my own bed, and I opened my eyes, and one of his friends was there. And I thought, my blood ran cold, and I thought, I'm going to be murdered at my own house today. And his buddy got up and he walked out, and my ex-husband came in and pulled me out of bed and said I had to get up and make breakfast. And I got my oldest daughter out of her crib, who was probably a year or 18 months old, and I made breakfast, and all of us sat there around that kitchen table, and I tried to feed my baby with my face hanging in my plate. All of us sitting there under that sick cloud of dysfunction, acting like absolutely nothing had happened. And I had that huge lump of shame stuck right here, and the only thing that would make that go away was another fifth of Jack Daniels. And when I drank like that, something else would happen like that. And my life snowballed, and it went, and it went, and it went, and it went for years. And I would get so sick and tired and hate it, and I'd run away out into the world. And when I ran away out into the world, I'd wake up to some nameless face out there. The only difference was out there is he'd leave some money on the nightstand. And I'd come back home and live like that there. And that was a house that my 2 little girls grew up in. It was a house of hate, and it was a house of violence that no child should ever see. And I probably lived like that for like 14 years. And it was horrendous. So when I got court ordered and got that DUI that night and the other charges against me, I don't remember who got me out of jail. It's unfortunate, but I just don't remember. When I came home, I remember I looked at him and I said, these people seem to think I got some sort of problem with alcohol. And if I'm going to try this going sober thing, I got to stop doing these things, you know, because he got paid money or he got paid drugs, and that's the truth of it. But I got to stop doing these things because it makes me feel bad about myself. And I'm sure there's things he liked about me being abstinent, because the house was always clean, and everybody's clothes was always washed, starched, and ironed. You know, and there was somebody that opened the door when my oldest daughter came home from little kid school and said, what kind of day did you have at school today? She didn't go to school in her pink fuzzy slippers no more. She didn't have to tell kids how come mom slept in the bush with snow all over her last night and had to go to the hospital because she had frostbite. Things like that. You know, it was semi-okay. But what I didn't understand is the longer I had stayed abstinent, the more my brain started to clear up, the more I would think, you know what, maybe I can do something with my life. Maybe I can make myself a little bit different. Maybe I could go to school. Maybe I can be something, and the less he was able to do this with me. When we got married, I was only, legal age was 21. I was 18, so our house wasn't, my name wasn't on our house, my name wasn't on the bank accounts, my name wasn't on a charge account, a utility bill, or anything. So he pretty much had me stuck. I wasn't allowed to have any friends but his. It was pretty bad. But I took a job. Somebody offered me, one of the girls I hung out with in the program, her dad offered me a job in a music warehouse, and I took it. He was very angry about that because I was never allowed to have a job, except the one he said I could have. You don't pay tax on curb service, you know what I mean? And so he refused to take me to work. I paid one of the girls at the warehouse to pick me up and take me to work, and I worked there 6 months. I bought my first naked little pickup truck, and he was mad because he didn't have to sign for it. Oh Lord, he was so mad, and it just wasn't working out. But I always had the tendency back then to believe everything that happened in the world was my fault. Somewhere around 2 years, I can't even tell you exactly when it was, somewhere around 2 years, things were starting to get real bad. And I'm still going to all these meetings. I remember at the Canfield meeting, we had this guy. Actually, my first sponsor, Racine, is the one who absolutely forced me to wear underpants. I should tell you that. Years later, my sponsor was going on a cruise, and we were all out at the restaurant, and me and Racine, that was her sponsor, his name Racine's, walking out of the restaurant, hugging on each other, and I looked at her and I said, every time I get a wedgie, I get a resentment against you. You know that. But I love you. That's why I say with everything I mean, that I've literally been raised from childhood in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's true. When I got here, I had no manners. I couldn't talk to you. It was terrible. I mean, it was really terrible. But I was still hanging out at the Canfield meeting. We had this little guy running around the meeting. His name was Carl. And Carl was probably 5'2", maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. And he was the worst 1960s burnout I ever seen in my entire life. And he wore this velvet brocade, I guess it was a smoking jacket. He smoked his cigarettes in this big, long plastic hickey. He had dandruff in his toupee. How the heck do you get dandruff in a toupee? He thought he was so cool. We were all like, what a dork, And one night this is back when I was still young. I started lifting weights with the guys when I was like 13, 14 years old. I could bench press 180 pounds. And so I'm in line for the coffee. He's behind me. All of a sudden, I feel something rub my bum, right? Next thing I know, I got Carl up the wall and switchblade at his throat. I said, you touch me like that one more time, I'm going to dust your junkie. And Bill W. he's howling and laughing, and he comes over and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Kim, you can put him down now, And I looked, and Carl's little feet was about that far off the ground, and so I put Carl down, and Bill looks at me and gets in front, puts a hand on each shoulder, and he says, Cammy, it's not nice to bring switchblades to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I stopped bringing my switchblade to Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God for you guys. But so bit by bit, you were teaching me, like our book says, we are people who normally do not mix. But it was somewhere around 2 years, and it had to be springtime because I had the windows open in the truck. It was a nice day, and I pulled in my driveway and I heard the noise, and my oldest daughter yelling, and I running in the house, and my husband had her down on her back in the hall and with his knees in her chest and his left hand pulled back to hit her. And I knocked him off of her, and I pulled her up, and I said, get your little sister and get out of here, and don't come back tonight. Go to Mimi's house, go to a friend's house, just call me and tell me where you're at. And that's the night I looked at him and I said, I'm going to tell you something, boy. I've allowed you to whip the tar out of me for 14, 15 years, whatever it was. But I said, you touch one of my girls one more time, don't you go to sleep. Because I will take that 10.5-inch butcher knife I got out there in the kitchen, I will gut you from your nether parts of your neck. I will gut you New York style in your sleep if you touch one of my girls one more time. What you do to me is one thing. What you do to my children is a different thing. Don't touch them again. And he knew I meant it, and I knew I had to get out of there. I knew I had to get out of there, so I started stashing money in the Teamsters Credit Union. And I know to this day, he went through my stuff and saw a statement and saw how much money I was accumulating and knew exactly what I was going to do. And what I walked into that night was a trap that I fell for because I hadn't worked a step, because I had no God of my understanding, because I hadn't built a support group except of the people with the exact same amount of sobriety that I had, because all we had to give each other was our disease. We had nothing to give each other. So we've been out at a meeting, the Friday night meeting, and we went to the restaurant that stayed open all night after the meeting, and laughing and joking and talking about nothing that meant anything. I looked at the clock, it's like, oh, it's 1:30, I got to be to work at 5 o'clock, I got to go. So I'm going up my street, and I looked, and there's some cars and trucks in the driveway, and it was like, oh, holy cow, they're in there partying again, and because they were in there with all kind of liquor and other things, and now, in 2.5 years, do you think I told anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous about that? No, you know why? Because I was a strong person, I could handle it. And, well, let me tell you something, that night handled me. And the first thing that should have tipped me off is the fact that I go to the front door, and I went to open the door, and the door was locked. Now, my door was never locked unless I was all drunk and goofy and hallucinating the FBI and tree people and crap in my front yard, you know. And the Austintown police told me one night I called them 19 times on my own self. Called them crying. Somebody threw a paper shopping bag at the end of my driveway, and I called them crying, told them there was a decapitated head in that bag. They had to come and get it and take it away. Finally, it's one of my best cop buddies showed up at 4:30 in the morning. It was like, "Can me please, if you go to sleep, honey, the head will disappear." You know. But anyway, I expected my door to be open, so I'm digging through my purse. I leaned on the door flies open. He was there with 3 of his buddies, and they grabbed me and they held me down, and for the next, I don't know how long, many hours, they did whatever they wanted to do to me. And I used to whine and cry and say that was the saddest thing that ever happened to me in my life, but that's a lie. I told myself to do what I did for the next 2 years, because the saddest thing that ever happened to me in my life is the fact that I took my beat-up body and I pulled my clothes back together, and I crawled to the coffee table and I grabbed a liter of Jack Daniels and I tipped it up in the air. Instead of putting myself back together and crawling to the kitchen and picking up the telephone and calling somebody I had met in those 2.5 years and saying, "Can you please come and get me out of this hellhole I've been living in half my life and lying to you about for 2 years?" Because minimally somebody would have taken me to the hospital, you know. And that led to the 2 most horrible years of my life back out there. So now I'm back out there. I'm walking in a bar, and I sit down, you know, and I think I'm going to have a good time. So I sit at the bar, and I order my favorite thing in all the world, a double of Jack on the rocks. And I pick it up, and I hope I never forget what this feels like. Pick it up, and I get it far enough down my throat to where you can't get it back, and the words, "Rarely have we seen a person fail," would go through my head, and then I'd see myself in the mirror behind the back bar, and it wasn't good. It wasn't pretty. And I started realizing that the only thing anybody out there wanted from me was either my money or the other thing. Now all I can think about is all of you guys. And I remember walking into the meetings for the first couple times, you know. Y'all were huggy, touchy-feely people. And I didn't like that. I didn't like it. You know, and it had to be like trying to love and hug on a little porcupine. You know, because I didn't understand it. And to be honest with you, it frightened me. because it had been so long in my life since anything good touched me. It scared me, and I didn't know what to do with it. Anytime somebody's mean and intimidating, it's because they're scared to death inside, and I didn't know what to do with it. And even Bill, as hateful as I was and mad because he called me shithead, you know what I mean? It's like, now I'm realizing, he just teased you because he liked you a lot. You're just being too sensitive, unbelievable. But now all I can think about is you guys, because I realized I was just so devastatingly lonely because I didn't even know it, that you snuck in the back door and I had fallen helplessly and hopelessly in love with all of you and didn't even realize it till I didn't have you anymore. And I started thinking about things that you said to me. You know what, Kim, keep coming back. Kim, we love you. Don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens. A little late for that now. I remember one night at the Friday night meeting, I had such a terrible time with names, and the old ladies there did not like me at all. Some of them actually weren't nice. They just weren't nice. And that's okay, because you know what? Those things taught me how to never treat a newcomer. And that's okay. It's all right. But this man came to speak at the meeting one night, and I'll never forget his name, because his name was Jack Daniels. That was his name. And he's passed away now. He was from West Virginia, which made me like him even more, And what he said affected me so profoundly. I only had about 6 months of abstinence. I had never made a comment about anything, and I wanted to make a comment. So I wrote a little thing on a piece of paper, and the meeting was a big meeting back then. And I stood up, and I don't know what made me turn around and look behind me, but there was a guy that was there when I came in. He was there when I left. He was there when I came back, and now Bert's passed away. His name was Bert Carmichael. Bert was 6 foot forever. His bald head, you had to watch how the light hit that bald head. It would blind you so you fell over, But I saw Bert stand there. It was like, oh, holy cow, and I sit down. And in front of all them people, Bert was like, Kimmy, stand up. And I'm standing up. I could feel my face getting all hot, and I know I'm like as red as a tomato. And I was like, God, I'm going to kill him when we get out of here. He's got everybody looking at me. And I'm standing there with my little piece of paper and my face hanging, and he says, Kimmy, look at me. And I was like, oh. And I turn around, and I'm looking at Bert, and there was the most beautiful smile on his face I had ever seen, and nothing but love radiating from Bert's eyes right to mine. And Bert looked at me that night, and he said, sweetheart, you forgot where you're at. When you're in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's ladies first. I was probably 30 years old, and that was the first time in my life any man had ever called me a lady, because when you do what I do when I'm drinking, I'm anything but that. And you see, the night that thing happened with my ex-husband and his friends, I forgot about those things. I forgot about all those Kims, I love you. Kim, keep coming back. Kim, you're a lady. You know what I mean? And it was those things that brought me back to you. It was that devastating loneliness that brought me back to you. It was your love and your mighty hearts that brought me back to you. Because it's like I believe that each and every one of us are given a gift. And it's our job and it's our obligation to show up at the table of life and present our gifts to one another. And if something happens and you take your gift away, then all of us are going to suffer for it. And it's because of your gifts that I came back. It's just like I believe that God, in his love for us and his infinite wisdom and compassion, understanding, and grace, put those two men together in 1935. Perfectly. An arrogant stockbroker and a humble little bum doctor. Perfect for each other. They tempered each other perfectly in that gatehouse in 1935, because he knew each and every one of us were going to be sitting in these seats today that needed it so badly. Nobody will ever convince me that's not true. I know that in my heart. That we are his favored children. Each and every one of us. They call us God's clowns, which is okay. But that's okay. I'll be more than willing to provide him a little entertainment. It's okay. After what he's done for me, But I needed you guys. I mean, that was a bittersweet realization for me, because Kim didn't ever want to need anybody, But the good thing about being back out there was that's where I ran into my Bob. my husband Bob, and I don't tell you those things to make you feel bad. And when you see me cry, it's not because I'm sad, it's because I think of what was then and what I have now. And I'm so grateful for what I have now. But that's where I run into my Bob in all that mess and all that relapse. And it was crazy for a while. But I would walk into, Bob owned a bar called the 7 Mile Inn, and I would walk into the 7 Mile Inn on a Saturday night. And the same 4 guys that worked at GM would be sitting on the first 4 bar stools. And Dickie would say, "Here comes Bob's strawberry. You know what she does." And I would make a crack and laugh at Dickie because I always laughed off things that hurt my feelings back then. And I'd walk into the kitchen, I'd give Bob a kiss, and I'd grab a liter of Jack Daniels off the bar and lock myself in the women's bathroom and drink the whole bottle or whatever. And Saturday, December 17th, 1988, I walked into the bar. Dickie made a nasty remark. Walked in the kitchen, gave Bob a kiss, hung my coat up in the closet, grabbed a big bottle of Jack Daniels. And to this day, I cannot tell you what happened. I don't know whether my heart had an arrhythmia. I don't know whether I had a seizure. I don't know. But I locked myself in the bathroom. And the next thing I know, I open my eyes and I'm laying on that filthy, dirty bathroom floor with used women's items and used condoms. And my face is stuck to when I tried to roll, I know my face is stuck to the floor in somebody else's vomit because I had not eaten for days and I hadn't had a chance to drink anything yet. And all I remember thinking is, this isn't the way I wanted to go out. And I hadn't been on my knees and said a prayer to God since I was a kid, and the Karen mine caved in outside of Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and killed my granddad, who was only 45 years old, and who was the only person I was safe with when my mom was at work when I was a kid, because my dad was in the Marine Corps. And the strange thing was, all I could do was pull myself up by my elbows to that dirty, filthy little bathroom sink to my knees. And the cry went out like, "Dear God, if you're up there and you hear me and you help me get well, I promise you, one day at a time, all the days that you grant me for the rest of my life, I promise you I will help you and love all your children in Alcoholics Anonymous." And somehow I was able to get up, and I stumbled through the bar, and I looked at Bob, and I said, "I'm sick, and I'm going home. Don't you call me. Don't you come over. Leave me alone. I don't want you coming over." And I evidently passed out, and I came to on late Sunday afternoon, and I started pacing. It's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? God, what am I going to do? And this soft voice just went through my head that said, "Go home, Kimmy. Go home to Alcoholics Anonymous." So I went to the Sunday night North Jackson meeting, where I got confronted by a dear friend who worked for Glen Bay Hospital, Glen Bay Treatment Center. And for the first time in 2 years, I told the truth. And he said, "Let me put you in inpatient treatment." And I said, "I'm not that bad." And so he said, "Okay, stop after work tomorrow at the outpatient center, and I promise, and we'll put you back in IOP." And I said, "Okay, I can do that." And he said, "Don't do anything before you get there." And I said, "I won't, I promise." And I didn't. But by the time I got there after work at 5:30 on Monday afternoon, man, I was starting to hear things and see things and creepy crawlies under my skin. And it was starting not to be good at all. And the next thing I know, my head's in his lap, he's driving the car, and I'm crying all the way up Route 45 to Glen Bay Hospital, where I spent the next 30-some days. And while I was there, Bob went to a intensive 2-week big book program in the mountains at Oil City, Pennsylvania. And after treatment, we moved in with each other. Oh my God. My counselor gave me one of them charts, with all them faces on. Happy faces, mean faces, scared faces, And I'd stand there crying every morning for about a half hour looking at the thing, trying to figure out who I was, because I just didn't know who I was. When I finally figured it out, I put the magnet on it to let Bob know whether he could speak to me or not, We're fighting one night, and He looked at me and he goes, "Do you realize you could have group therapy all by yourself?" So now I got a for real woman sponsor. I'm even more brain damaged, right? I'm even more brain damaged. I got a for real woman sponsor. I picked her because she's an old lady. I figure I can get around this one real easy, you know. She was wonderful. I mean, she was beautiful inside and out. She was beautiful till the first full moon come out. Then we're having these terrible fights, and I actually thought she had second sight. We're having terrible fights, and the phone rang one time. We were having an awful fight, and phone rings. And I pick up the phone. She goes, "What's going on over there?" I said, "Do you know what he called me?" She says, "Kimberly Scotchy, it's not about what kind of husband he's supposed to be. It's about what kind of wife you're supposed to be." So I got the phone and I went. And she says, "I know what you just did." And it was like, oh my gosh, she's got cameras in my house. And Bob would go to work, and man, I would get like in flowers and I would get the top of the curtains, you know, all kinds of stuff like that, because I thought she had cameras. It made me scared to death not to do everything she told me to do. I don't realize that when I'm wigging out a little bit, Bob goes down the corner payphone and calls her and says, "Kim's wigging out." Because I was crazier than the you-know-what rat, you know what I mean? And it was bad. Like I said, you start drinking when you're 10, you stop. A little bit of an emotional problem going on when you stop, you know? And unbelievable. But I remember one time we went shopping. I still hate the grocery store. I will not go to the grocery store on Friday or Saturday because them women's crazy in the grocery store. And so we're at the grocery store, and he's got the cart. I would go get 3, 4, 5, 6 things because I want to hurry up and get out. So every time I come back, he's taking the cart and gone somewhere. So about the 4th time, I got an armload of stuff. He got the cart, and I go in the cart, right? And he goes, "There's 2 years of recovery." So I go. He goes, "What did I tell you? What kind of program do you work?" So I back up about 10 feet. There's probably 20 people in the aisle, and I turn around, and I unbuckle my pants, and bend over, pull my underwear down, bend over, and stick my butt at him. Bob goes, "Oh, you are uncivilized and a barbarian." Bob was like a Brooks Brothers stock market alcoholic. You know, and I was like your typical hillbilly, street-walking little hoe, you know, recovering hoe. And it was unbelievable. Our journey is unbelievable. He got his degree. You couldn't live with him for 2 months when he graduated from college. I was so jealous of him, it wasn't funny. He said, we were out at the mall, and one time he was mumbling something. I said, "What'd you say?" He says, "Never mind, Kimberly, I was just speaking rhetorically." I said, "What the heck is that?" I was so mad at him. You know, then I got a year sober, and I put an application in. I never told him because it's like, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to get hired. You know, and I had the first interview. I had the second interview, and then I got called for the big one at the township hall with the police chief and the fire chief and trustees and everybody who knew everything I'd done and exactly what I'd been. And a week later, I got a letter that said it was by unanimous vote at the township hall that you were accepted as firefighter for Austintown Township. And they handed me the keys to a $250,000 fire engine. You know, I worked in that music warehouse with 100 women and me, and I was on that fire department with me and 100 men, and I'll take the 100 men any day of my life. I walked in there for drill the first time, and it was like, ooh, I could have had a good time with this a year ago. But it's like, you got to be a good girl now. You can't do that. And it was one of the best times of my life. It was one of the best times of my life. I was privileged to be on the fire department for about 10 years, and a year and a half I was on medical leave. The last year and a half I had to have 6 vertebrae fused in my back. and which is why I walk funny. And they wouldn't let me quit. They kept me on medical leave. I was the next one to get hired full-time for the full-time job. I wanted that job so bad. I wanted it so bad. You don't know how bad I wanted that job. And not because I make good money. It's because I loved it and I was good at that job. I was so good at it. And when I went to the State Firefighter Academy, I was the only woman in that class of about 60. They tortured me. They tortured me, man. I'm telling you, they tortured me. But it became obvious after about a year that I wasn't going to be able to do the job like I should have been able to do the job. And I thought if one of those guys would get hurt or somebody else would get hurt because I didn't do the right job, that's not good. And a young man behind me had a crappy job. He had 5 kids. He had a little girl with spina bifida. He would put on his gear. Our gear weighed 75 pounds when you got the air pack and all that and everything on it. It weighed 75 pounds. He would put on all that gear and get sponsors and walk all the way to Cleveland from Youngstown to make money for spina bifida. And the one night I'm sitting there and I thought, you know what, Kim, you want the job. He's next in line behind me. John needs the job. Not a hard decision to make. So I resigned and John got the job. And you guys don't know it because you don't live there. Last year, the tones went off for the truck to go, and John was working. He was on the crew that day. And John didn't come to the truck, and when they went back in the big room to check on him, he was dead in the chair. And but you know what? His wife and his little girl and the kids that are still at home will have his insurance, and she'll have his pension, and that little girl with spina bifida will have his insurance for the rest of her life. And I knew immediately that was the right decision. God's wonderful. God is so good to us. You know, but that's when I ended up working down at Mahoning County Task in the criminal justice field and doing drug and alcohol assessments with our parolees and street people, and that I love so much. Some of the people in AA started calling me the bum magnet. Here comes Kim, the bum magnet. You attract the worstest, stinkiest bums. I said, who else gonna love them? Some of you all forget what you smelled like when you rolled through the door, huh? Of course I'm gonna love them. I was telling Liz outside, I walked through the lobby when I was still smoking for real cigarettes to go smoke one. And there was 2 kids sitting in the lobby, and they were like, we like Miss Kim and everything, you know, but don't make her mad. She all tatted up and stuff, you know? So awesome. So awesome. But my life has just been unbelievable. It's been amazing. You know, my family got so much better. My oldest daughter wouldn't speak to me for 4 years. She had every right to be mad at me. She had every right to be angry at me. And, oh, okay. She had every right to be angry at me. And all of a sudden I get an invitation to her high school graduation. It's like, oh, Bob, we got to go, you know. So we go, I get tone the hair down from hooker red and get a dress that comes down to my knees, you know, and a nice little sailor dress, you know. And so we go to the graduation and take the pictures, all kind of stuff. And she turns around, walks, she's walking away. I look at Bob and I said, she must be eating an awful lot of McDonald's or something. I thought, she's porking up pretty bad. Well, about a week later, I get a phone call. Mommy, can you come over? Mommy. She never called me Mommy in her life. And I said, yeah, I can come over. So I went over, and she's sitting there, and her head's hanging. And I said, what's wrong? And she goes, I need $450. I said, well, I'm going to give you $450. You have to tell me what for. And she says, I'm pregnant and I want to have an abortion. And man, the E went over the eye real quick. And she got this look, and I said, don't get scared. Don't get scared. I'm not mad. I'm not mad. I just wasn't expecting you to say that. And I said, you know what, honey? I got to go home, and I got to do some things and talk to somebody, and I promise you I'll be back in the morning, and I'll give you my answer. And so I went home, and I called my sponsor, and I did some praying, and my sponsor was like, you know what? You know what to do. Why do you got to stick your fingers in everybody's pie? You know this is God's business, not yours. Okay. So I did some praying, and I went back the next morning, and she's sitting there so beautiful with her head hanging. And I said, honey, don't hang your head. You look at me. I have to say something. And she looked at me, and I said, I just want to say two things. I want to tell you, what your dad thinks about this or what I think about this can't be part of your decision. I want you to know whatever decision you make, it's going to be with you for the rest of your life, and I know that because I've been there. But I also want you to know that no matter what decision you make, I will love you with every fiber of my being to my soul, because you can never do anything to make me stop loving you. And I slid $450 across the table. And all the way home, I condemned myself for being the worst mother on the face of the earth. And about a week later, she called me and said, Mommy, come and get your money back. I changed my mind. And I said, you know what? You keep it because you're going to need, crib and tidy duds and butt wipes and all that kind of stuff. And she, then I was like, I don't know how to be a mother. You're making me a grandmother. What's this about? So 2 days before my 39th birthday, here he come. And we had no boys in our family. We were a family of girls. And I'm telling you what, he was a ringtail hooter, And I held that little boy in my arms, and I thought, you know what, man, I ain't going to be that crabby old rocking chair crap I had. We're going to ride on the fire truck, and we're going to have adventures that are unbelievable. And, then all of a sudden, I became the mother of the year, I just didn't like the way she's raising that boy. We're on the porch one day. He rolls down my front porch. I had an old house with a cement porch. He rolls down the porch, skins his knees. So I got him in the rocking chair. He's crying, She comes home from work, and she slams the car door. She comes up. She goes, You cried long enough. I said, What do you mean? You don't even know what happened. He fell down. He got hurt. He's still crying. Evidently, he ain't cried long enough. She says, Mom, you're going to make a faggot out of that boy. So as I start standing up, hand the boy to Bob, she starts backing up because she knows I'm mad. So she backs up, and I said, I'm going to tell you something, little girl. You may be 5 inches taller than me and outweigh me by 50 pounds, but I can still slide you up that wall. We don't say that word in this house. We do not say that word in this house. And let me tell you something else. If 15 years from today, this boy's walking the streets of downtown Youngstown wearing lime green pants, platform shoes, and carrying a purse, I'm going to love him, and you can't stop me. So how do you like that? Don't you start that stuff that he can't cry. Don't do that to him. Please, please don't do that to him. So many boys that I grew up with had that done to them. Don't do that to him. I'm begging you, don't. And he's my Marine. He's my Marine on the tag here. He is the most loving, compassionate, understanding, and I bet his wife, if she knew all that, would say, thank you, because he's so good to his little wife, All through the years, I watched my family grow. I had to watch my girls pick bad men because I taught them to do that. It's hard watching what you've perpetuated in your kids sometimes. But I also watched them get better because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to throw my youngest daughter out of the house because of her drinking. But June 12th of this year, my daughter got her 13-year coin, which is so awesome. Sometimes we got to do what we got to do. I have 2 home groups. Thursday Night Original Austintown group, which has been my home group since I had a year sober. And I have the Monday night women's meeting, which is the one that makes me want to pull my hair out. We were just talking, I was telling Alicia earlier, sometimes they can be so catty and so mean to each other. We had a blow up a couple weeks ago, and it's like I told them, you know what? Instead of being understanding, what's our code? Love and tolerance. What happened to it? What'd you do with it? Where'd it go? Where'd you throw it? Well, such and such, she's so controlling. She's so controlling. I said, you know what? You took your resentment in your coffee pot and you went to another meeting. It is what it is meeting. You can say whatever you want here. Nobody judges you. I said, so you took your resentment in your coffee pot and you made another meeting. So you know who suffers? Intergroup suffers. The district suffers. New York suffers. Because now nobody has enough money to send anybody anything. How awful. Instead of sitting down and hashing it out, do you know why she's so controlling? Because her life at home is so out of control. And instead of with compassion and love and trying to help her, you get all mad and take off and call her names behind her back. You gossip. It's horrible what you've done. Now you're mad at me because I told you the truth. So be it. Shame. It's a shame what's happening. It's a shame. You know, yeah, they make me want to pull my hair out sometimes. And I said, it's not a good example to the young girls from treatment that are coming here. That's an awful example, screaming and yelling at each other like that. So yeah, they do. You know, there was a time in my life when, 5 years sober, when I almost committed suicide because I was, you know, I just couldn't forgive myself for the things that I'd done. And Bob was going to work one night and he threw a tape at me. He said, I want you to listen to this. And I was in such a nasty mood. I said, whatever. And he said, promise me. I was like, oh, no. He said, I want you to promise me. I was like, all right, I promise. It's like, geez, now I got to do it because I promised, you know. And so he goes to work, and so I listened to the tape, and it happened to be Keith Drum, who I love Keith Drum so much. If you ever get to hear a CD or whatever, make sure you listen to it because he's awesome. But I listened to Keith Drum, and what he talked about was the horrible, heinous things that he had done when he was out there, and how he learned to forgive himself. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't believe this. And then I was sitting there, and Bob's Bible was sitting there, and I was not, and I'm still not a constant Bible reader, but I picked it up, and it fell open to Psalm 139, and towards the bottom it said, for thou didst form my inward parts, and thou didst weave me in my mother's womb, and I will give thanks to thee, my God, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And then he left the PBS channel on, and I sit there with my head in my hands like this, and there was a motivational speaker on, and his horse laugh made me look up, because it was a horse laugh. And when I looked up, it looked like he was looking right in my eyes. His name's Les Brown. And he said, you know what? We have all been blindsided by life. It's going to happen sooner or later if it hasn't. The trick is, baby, when it hits you, when you least expect it, learn to land on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up. It was like, wow. That was my first index card of positive thought. And from that day forward, if I heard something, if you said something, if I heard it in a movie, whatever, I stole it and put it on a card. And I must have probably 600, 500 of them. I taped them to my steering wheel of my car. I taped them to the cupboards in the kitchen. I put them on the bathroom mirror, in books I was reading, whatever, because my head was so full of negative thoughts, I didn't know what else to do to interrupt them. I just didn't know what else to do. But it was like, you know what, God, you have got to help me. You've got to help me change this, because I can't carry this burden of everything I've done. You know, the old women in the program would be like, do you think you're better than God? And I'd be like, no, of course I don't. Well, God forgives you. How come you can't forgive yourself? I said, I don't know. I don't turn it over. No, but you old bags, you're not going to tell me how, huh? You know. Now I probably got all these young girls looking at me going, you old bag, you're not going to tell me how, are you? But, you know, I was like, God, you got to help me. And so all of a sudden I was compelled to start writing. And I mean, so overwhelmingly compelled. And I grabbed the pen and I wrote probably for 20 minutes, a half hour. And it came out with this poem that I wrote called An Eagle Soars. And it goes, child goes to God, her fear-filled choice, and Satan screams, his anger voiced. The angels laugh, God just smiles. They've waited patient all this while for child to come to God in pain and render him her life of shame. She had to give it all, you see, in order that her life run free. For every shard of pain she told, he gave her strength 100-fold. Through fear, depression, rage, and hate, his arms around her gave her faith. Resentment, shame for actions past, acceptance gained from love so vast. The journey darkens, death is sought. He lifts her high upon a rock where she can see at distance far, a different self, God's shining star. He lays the plan, she does the work, and in his time, he eases hurt. The fearful child, the victim waif, is given courage and strength so great that she can do most anything. Her hand in his, her heart can sing. She conquers fear, abuse, and pain and rests in him to rise again, to fight for change, defects removed. God kisses boo-boos and mends with love. The soul is strong, a spirit's born. An eagle soars, the wings her own. Ascending darkness sees a light, with talons armed prepares her flight. Through lightning clouds she gains her reach, heart bursting towards a soul at peace. God's rainbow severs storm-split skies to watch the soul triumphant rise. I know God gave that to me. I went to sleep that night and I slept the most peaceful sleep I had ever slept in 5-6 years. And when I got up in the morning, I knew everything that you had tried to give me had fallen into place, because it was like I went to bed 5'4.5", and I woke up 6 feet tall. My shoulders were back, and it was like, you know what, man? Lead, follow, or get the heck out of my way, because I got a promise I made to God that I got to keep. You know, I got recovery to live, not to just do, but to live. You know, I got places to go and people to help. This is what I got to do. And it was always a journey, but it's been an amazing journey ever since that day has happened. And I've been through some really, really bad stuff. I had 2 guys with that incident with my husband come to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, one plopped himself right down next to me. And I said, you know what? You got every right to be here in Alcoholics Anonymous just like I do. Right now, you do not have the right to sit next to me, but I'm glad you're here. I am glad you're here. I am. But right now, please don't sit next to me. I'm not ready for anything like that. But I had to welcome him to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's my job. That's my job. I went through, my oldest daughter, my youngest daughter got raped. That brought back a lot of stuff. I had to go through anger issues again because I had a hard time with it. It just brought back too much stuff. She wanted me to be her counselor, and I said, I cannot do that. I can't do that for you. You have to go find a counselor. She's had her own tough road. She's had her own tough road. Just a few years back, well, more than a few years now, I was still working. Bob and I were working 2 different shifts, and he had been going to the doctor. I knew he had been going to the doctor, and we hardly got to see each other. We both worked full-time, many hours full-time. And I owned a driver intervention program, plus he had a private practice. So we barely got to see each other, and when we did, we were like dog tired, you know. But I come home from work one night, and I see medicine sitting on the counter by the sink, and it's like, you know what, I had to be nosy, I had to look at it, you know. So I see his medicine bottles, and one was digoxin, and it's like, I was an EMT, I know what that is. It's for congestive heart failure. And let me tell you something, me and God had a loud, closed discussion for about 15 minutes. I was horrible, having a fit like a little kid, you know, and all of a sudden I just stopped. And it's like, you know what, Kim? You're not worried about Bob, you're making this all about you. You're worried about what's going to happen to you if something happens to Bob. Why don't you stand up and be the strong woman you've been taught to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, because everything's going to be all right. No matter what happens, everything is going to be all right. You know, you've been taught to be a very, very strong person, and I am a very strong person, you know, but I was just very upset when I found that out. Let's do everything we can do to get Bob well, and everything's going to be okay. And you know what? That's what we did, and he started getting much, much, much better, much, much, much better. And a few months later, right before Christmas, I had spoken to Jackson Mills, and they asked me to be a spiritual speaker on Sunday morning. You know. And I got up and washed my hair, and all of a sudden, boom, no hearing in my right ear, just gone, done. So I doctored with it, and finally my family doctor sent me to an ear specialist and sent me for MRI, and I go in to see him like a couple days before Christmas, whatever, and he's got this boo-boo face, and I'm like, what? And he said, Kim, you got a brain tumor. And it's like, okay, what's the next right thing to do? He says, nobody has ever said that to me. And I said, man, you don't know who my family is, and so it was a late appointment, and I come to my home group and borrowed somebody's phone. I called my sponsor, and she says, oh, gosh, Kimmy, are you scared? And I said, well, I don't know what I am. And she says, well, is anything bothering you? And I said, well, yeah. And she said, what is it? And I says, Ange, if they do surgery, they're going to have to shave my head. She says, you walked into Alcoholics Anonymous with the mohawk. Don't talk to me about your stinking hair. Then she says, is anything else bothering you? And I said, well, yeah. And she said, well, what is it? And I said, you know what, Ange, it's in a bad spot. What if they do surgery, and when I come out of it, I'm not quite right? And there was dead silence. She said, Kimmy, honey, get real. She says, ever since you came back from that relapse, sweetie, you ain't been quite right. So if something happens, nobody gonna notice anything. So I was getting ready to make this thing this big, and she made it this big, and that's what sponsors are for. And it was amazing, but what an absolutely wonderful, wonderful journey. It would be 3 years on September 1st. Bobby and I were he was laying on, I had a big sectional, he was laying on the couch part, and I was sitting next to him up by his head, and I had put something on Chrissy's Facebook. We were laughing like crazy. It had two little girls, and it says, there's always that one sister, she looked just like me when I was little, she's going like this. So I said, of all the sisters you could have got stuck with in recovery, you got stuck with me. And we were laughing like crazy. And so we get up, and we're walking out to the kitchen. I was going to get us both a cup of coffee. And Bob was a big guy, 6'3", 6'3.5", whatever. And we stopped in the kitchen, and he turns around, and he takes my face in his hands. And he walks down. I thought he was going to go smoke. And he walks down a couple basement steps, and he shot himself through the heart. And I'm sorry. He was the most magnificent man I've ever known. In the beginning, when he was so nice to me, I didn't trust him. He tied my shoes for me when I came home from treatment because I could not remember how to tie my shoes. When I chose radiation for the brain tumor. 6 hours, they bolted my head to a table. My hair all fell out. I was missing my front teeth. I had a partial plate. I was missing 4 of my front teeth. I'd be laying in bed, bald-headed, nothing homelier than a bald-headed hillbilly. You could tell my cousins put rocks in their snowballs, and my head looked like a potato, Laying in bed, missing your 4 front teeth, he'd reach over and he'd pull me to him, and he'd say, "You are so beautiful." We'd be watching TV out of the blue. He would jump up, and that dancing on Three Stooges that Curly used to do out of the blue. He would do that dance in the middle of the living room floor. We'd be walking through the mall, and some kind of music would come on, and he'd grab me and start dancing with me in the middle of the mall. And we have a disease that can kill us stone cold sober. If I chose to drink right now, it wouldn't be a physical craving that would kill me. It would be the mental obsession. Bob was bipolar. In 27 years, through horrid side effects, he never, ever did not take his medication, ever. When the police had me get his medication out of the cupboard, he had not filled any, and I mean his heart medicine, everything. That was September 1st, 2014. He had not failed any of his medications since April of that year. He was my Bobby McGee. But, at that particular day, I would have looked at you and said, my plans all went wrong. But God's plans never do. I have had so many good things happen in my life. When my grandson when my oldest daughter got married, my grandson, obviously he was born and she wasn't married. And I was raised in a Lutheran church. And so when she got married, it's like, well, everybody knows he's here, let's take him to church. And when we're walking out, the minister looks at that innocent little baby and says, well, this is a new one for me. And I looked at him and I said, you of all people should know that sometimes God's blessings come in his time, not ours. And I swore that I would never, ever set foot in church again as long as I lived. Now, I went to your weddings and your christenings and da-da-da-da. I never went to church. I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. And my friend should know that sometimes God's blessings come in his time, not ours. And I swore that I would never, ever set foot in church again as long as I lived. Now, I went to your weddings and your christenings and da-da-da-da. I never went to church. I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. And my friend in the fellowship, when that happened with Bobby, his church, for Bobby's memorial, made dinner for 800 people. I was talking earlier. I went from I'm on disability. Went from an $85,000 a year income to $698 a month. They helped me with utility bills. They brought food to my house. It probably took me maybe 3 or 4 months to get out of a little bit of a daze. And one morning, Sunday morning, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to church. And I've been going ever since. And I love going. I love it. I become closer with my daughters, much closer with my daughters because of it. Much closer with my grandkids because of it. I never got angry at God. I never questioned it. I didn't realize that till 8 months down the road. I never, ever questioned it. Never questioned God. Never got angry at Bobby. He had to be in such a tortured place because he would have never, ever, ever in his life done anything to hurt me, ever. And I know that. And then 6 days later, his best buddy, my brother on the fire department, Randy, hung himself in his backyard. His poor wife had to go through that, But I loved Randy like my own brother, So if God knows, if you're diagnosed with a mental illness, don't ever just stop taking your medicine. Please, don't do that. Always talk to your doctor first. I'm not talking about if you're one of them people who diagnose yourself with a Valium deficiency. I mean a for real thing, But I think out of everything, what I would like you to know is given a chance, I wouldn't go back and change a thing in my life. Not one thing. I wouldn't change the ways that I've been hurt, nor would I change even the ways that I've hurt others. I wouldn't change that moment when I tried to breathe life back into my Bobby, because I think if I changed one little thing, I had the most incredible love story any woman could have ever been granted, and I think if I changed one little thing, maybe that would be taken away. And see, all of you are part of my love story, and then maybe you would be taken away. And I knew I could live without Bob, but I know I can't possibly survive without all of you. And I would not change a thing, because you're worth more than some dinky little thing in my past that I would even consider changing. And I love all of you so very, very much. And I don't believe it never ever happens, even though I ask it. I don't think I should be thanked. I think you should thank God, and you should thank the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, not me. Not me. You want to do something for me? You get out of here and you stay sober, and you live your lives with love, you live your lives with laughter, and you live your lives out loud, and you rock on in your recovery. I love you. Thank you.
I have always been afraid of changes, but you show me life is full of faces. Sometimes clouds got in our favorite places, but we were young and unaware.
Oh, I got you, there's no reason to chasing payment on my own, 'cause you're here to stay every night.